special bulletin.
This is a test of the emergency broadcast system.
5. Check for sound. 4.
It's showtime.
3.
Let's
2.
go.
1.
Welcome to the Pro Audio Suite, a podcast for audio and voiceover professionals. Don't forget to check us out on our Facebook, the Pro Audio Suite Podcast. Now let's get on with the show. From Los Angeles, George Whittam. From Chicago, Robert Marshall. From Sydney, Australia, Robbo. And from sunny Melbourne, Andrew Peters. This is the Pro Audio Suite. Welcome to another Pro Audio Suite. This week we're definitely global. Our special guest is based in Milan, in Italy. He runs a studio called Networks Europe. His name is Daniel Richards. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you. Lovely to talk to you.
Well, it's actually, we're all over the place because Robert it's nighttime for Robert in Chicago, and it's afternoon for Robbo and I in Australia.
Just had my leftover Chinese for lunch.
Oh dear. That does not bode well. We better get this show over and done with pretty quickly. Yes.
There it was.
Yeah, that's right. Nasty. Now, I'm curious because obviously I've worked with you, Daniel, so we've talked to each other, on several occasions, but I've never asked you the question, how did you end up in Milan?
Right. Well, I was in a very small theatre company in the UK, in the southwest of England, Exeter area, in the early 1980s, and I was running a community theatre, but we also had what was then called an alternative comedy duo. I was in an alternative comedy duo called Human Cartoon, and we used to support some of the new comedians that came down to the southwest of England from London, and one of them was a guy called Ben Elton. I don't know if anybody knows about him. I presume
I've met
so.
Ben.
Oh, great. Okay, there you go. And he'd asked us to go up to London and support him in a gig and go on to, or at least do a test for what was then the Comedy Store. And for some preposterous reason, we decided not to stay faithful to the community. And then I kind of thought, well, hang on a minute. I'm not quite sure if this is really the right decision. Let me just take a couple of weeks off to think about this. And I just happened to come over to Italy to do my thinking. And I'm still here 35 years later, still thinking, kind of trying to decide what to do with my life. No, that's just kidding. But I mean, that's how it happened. I mean, I just came over for a break and then got into a bit of voice recording over here, started teaching at university over here, and then opened up my studio and so on. So, I mean, it literally was, I'm still on an extended holiday, basically.
So your background was not necessarily voiceover, it was comedy.
Yeah, very early on. I mean, I was 22 when I came over here. So, and the comedy kind of got hit the comedy on the head at that point because being, at that time, to be honest, being English in Italy was really quite a novelty for the Italians. It was, are you English? Where are you from? There were not that many foreigners around. So the comedy, the performing part, there wasn't an audience, basically. So that fell by the wayside. But the voiceover work, I started that pretty much immediately I got here. Obviously, early 1980s, no ISDN, no internet.
Only FedEx.
If you wanted to record something in English, you had to have the person right there, or send a letter pretty much to somebody, or a fax, they existed, to a studio somewhere else and get them to do it, or fly over and do the session yourself. So, I mean, having an English person here in Milan that was willing to sort of go to different studios throughout the day and do their stuff in English for them was good for everybody. And they really, I was pretty much in the early 80s. I think there were 2 or 3 of us doing it. I made my little cassette tape demo in a small studio, and the next day basically went around knocking on doors, got the Yellow Pages out, talking 1983, 84, got the yellow pages out and went around knocking on doors. And a week later, I was a voice talent. The phone just didn't stop ringing.
How much work was there, and what was the main work? Was it translation work, or was it stuff for the UK?
Yeah, no, it's very much what it still is today, what you and I do, our regular kind of bread and butter stuff. I mean, lots of corporate videos in English for the international fairs. Product videos, the company history, demo videos of how products worked. And what's quite interesting, I mean, I don't know if it's interesting, what happened is a lot of these smaller companies, because Italy produces a hell of a lot of stuff. It really, and the area above Milan for tech and for furniture making, and then of course fashion in Milan itself, and their electronics and civil engineering companies, and
There's a company that makes a fader system for Pro Tools similar to Slate in Italy too. I think they're called like Devil something.
Yeah. I mean, I had hundreds of names in my address book, and I used to get in the car and drive out to some godforsaken part of the countryside above Milan and go into a factory where they'd have not a professional booth, but, somebody had made their film, and there was a kind of microphone in a small room, not necessarily a professional microphone either, and you just record the commentary to the corporate film, and off you go. It'd take me about 2 hours to get there and back. And films used to be so long in those days. There was just no idea that, it's best to get it over and done with in anything between 4 and 10 minutes. Things used to be like 40 minutes long with huge, really long shots of factory machinery working and so on. So I mean, syncing it all up and getting it right. Plus the fact that the company Cat used to do the translations. So I mean, it normally took me a couple of hours to work out what they were trying to say, put it into semi-decent English, or at least much better than they'd given me, and then go and record it. So it was quite a long and painstaking process. I'm talking about the early 80s, so things have improved hugely since then, also on the sort of translation and sensitivity to the need to communicate well in the language that you're trying to communicate in. That has improved vastly. But in those days, it was literally, well, my son is good at English. He translated it or whatever, and it was difficult to tell them that actually you needed 2 hours to go away and just rewrite the whole thing.
I think we both experienced that recently.
Well, we did, yeah, you're right. But and again, I repeat, it's much, much, much better than it used to be.
Yeah. When did you set up your studio?
I set it up in the late 80s, and I think we actually opened in 1990. People would always ask me, have you got a French, a German, a Spanish colleague? And then it started going a bit further afield, and it just seemed the right thing to do. Finally set something up and be able to record myself and have other foreign language voice talents come in and do the stuff. So we've always been known since then as a localization hub, basically. I'm still trying to convince our Italian clients that we can also do Italian, being in Italy and having 350 Italian voice talents on our books. And we do actually now, we do much more. But our real sort of locally, our reputation has been for localization, and rightly so. I mean, that's how it started.
So do you see networks as also a casting service as well as a studio?
Almost definitely. Yeah. I mean, we do send castings pretty much every day in lots of different languages, and that has been a sort of process of selection that's been going on for decades. Obviously, now it's much, much simpler to find voice talents with all the different services that there are out there, from Voice123 and Voices.com and so on and so on and so on, and also country-specific casting services or websites. But obviously the experience in whittling down the masses to those 3, 4, 5, 6 voices that will fit the bill for whatever you're trying to, or your clients are trying to cast, that still takes experience, I think. So yes, we do that, and we have several thousand on our own database, and then we're constantly expanding it by doing exactly what I've just said, going onto the sites, going to new studios, which is how we found you, I believe.
Yeah. So now you've got quite a few studios at Networks. When did you start to expand? Did you start off small and then grow, or has it always been kind of sizable?
Are they in the same facility, or are they?
They are in the same facility. Yeah. No, we started off with one in a lovely little apartment overlooking the park that leads to the Duomo, to Milan's cathedral. So we had a great view, and it was a 2-bedroom apartment. We didn't have any beds in it, obviously, converted into office space and studios. So yeah, we started off with one, then that became 2, and then we converted the most minuscule kitchen in the history of kitchens into a little booth, and I used to be able to record myself in there. And I must admit, we did quite a few links with the States and other countries in there. So then we had 3. And it was kind of pretty ridiculous. Tiny apartment with 3 studios in it. So at a certain point, we decided to get a bit more serious, and we came to this facility where we are now, where we have 5 studios, which is great. It gives us just that little bit more play. So yeah, and I would say 90% of the stuff we do is linking with people like yourself.
Yep.
So yeah, we can.
When,
there are times
when you're doing the localization, do you find that you're doing a lot of recording remotely with picture sync, or do you just do wild records and cut things in?
Kind of 50-50. A lot of the time, as we do a lot of e-learning as well, so longer videos, and it doesn't need the same degree of sync as maybe a corporate film, although actually it does, to come to think of it. But anyway, it's long. So there we very often, if the voice talent on the other end understands the source language, which, okay, for us is Italian, but then it often gets done first into English. So if our German, French, or whatever person is happy to have the English in their headphones and just go over it with a 1 or 2 second delay, then we do that. There's no need to actually really send them, detailed videos of screws going into holes or tractors going up and down the field kind of thing,
right.
Whatever it is.
So English becomes like a common, like you do that translation first and it helps the other translation.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's one way we do it. Although obviously for other stuff, I mean, for example, a series of stuff for MasterChef with Joe Bastianich, who the Americans may know. He's actually half Italian. And for the Italian version of MasterChef, he dubbed himself into Italian. So, yeah, for those, obviously, we sent him himself in the US version of MasterChef, and he went over it in Italian. We've done films for Sky and sending the video across. And all the ads we send the video across. I think you've got, what have you got now in the States? San Pellegrino is in the States right now. New campaign. Okay. Aquapana is out now. And all of that stuff we did from here with the video. Again, obviously it depends, because if it's a one-liner, we can do it once with the video, they can see it, and then we'll just go wild and put it on afterwards.
Are the translations done? Do you handle the translations as well, or do you?
We do.
That out? You do.
Yeah. We do the translations sometimes, depending on the client and depending on the job. We have a sort of a transcreation, as it's trendily called, service now. So we offer the translation of the copy as well, or transcreation.
Do you find that you have to find translators that are sort of aware of issues like timing and how to make the spirit of the copy work when there's timing issues or maybe even some sort of cultural thing?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so like different than the translator that would just translate,
Sure.
a textbook, for example. or
Absolutely, yeah. For sure. Timing for sure, although it's normally not that dramatic, but certainly the phrasing, the same register in the foreign language, and not, as you say, necessarily at all the same words. And that becomes quite tricky sometimes because obviously the client may not understand the new register and may even not very much like the fact that his or her words have been quite so obviously changed. So that's the art of persuasion.
and then probably the other thing you run into, and I know when we do, for instance, we start with an English, say, industrial video about whatever, some product, a printer, and then we have to do the Spanish version. And of course, the big battle there is that the Spanish is longer.
Oh, absolutely.
So we're always trying to fit things in. But I imagine when you're going from, say, Italian to English for their trade shows, you're finding yourself with space. Am I right?
Yeah. I mean, obviously one can try to add a tiny bit if that becomes dramatic. It's not normally that much of a problem. For German, going into German from English or into Arabic, that can become quite dramatic. So at that point, especially if it's an industrial video, as you said, or even an e-learning video, which maybe has been edited quite tightly in the original language, then we really have to say, can we please have the license to cut content? You have to give the translator something in very plain English, let's say, and also get the scissors out in terms of content, with discretion, of course. But the experience going along the way tells you, you become quite adept at knowing what you can cut without offending anybody, and of course without changing the meaning, and of course without leaving out essential stuff. But yeah.
So what's the worst direction? Like if going from like Swedish to Chinese or something, like what's the most dense language going to the most fluffed up, for lack of a better word,
Yeah. Well, I think
English is pretty dense, but is there denser than English?
No. I mean, in my experience, English is definitely the most compact language that we have to deal with, and then for sure, Arabic has caused us the most kind of headaches in terms of that extra time needed to say to get to the same content. And German sometimes. I mean, not always, but German can be pretty tricky.
It's like that classic joke where someone translates and the person speaks for 5 minutes and then the translator said, he said yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah, exactly. So it's a challenge, but yeah, it's always fun. And it's great to be able to give somebody back 15, 20 languages and everything is just perfectly synced up. So, I mean, it's a good feeling to be able to deliver and do. I mean, right at the beginning, to be perfectly honest, I mean, years and years and years and years ago, before we'd kind of got the hang of this, we used to just say, well, for the Arabic or the German, at the end of this sequence, you're just going to have to have a freeze frame for another 4 seconds. After all, it's only e-learning. They can handle it. Yeah. And that's what used to happen. But I mean, now I think I think for sure we've got the hang of making the language fit the timing.
Do you find that you have to use, resort to time stretching or compressing?
Very occasionally. Yeah, very occasionally. But again, it's really fractional.
It's funny how some people can read and they can take more time compression than other people where it's very obvious that it's been compressed. And other people, they just somehow the way they speak and they pronunciate everything, it compresses and survives a little bit better.
That's very true. Yeah, that's very true. Yes, the clearer the enunciation of the words and the less difference there is within a sentence or group of sentences. Because some people do tend to suddenly speed up and if you suddenly speed up and the rest of the stuff is kind of fairly slow, I'm exaggerating, of course, but if that is a characteristic of the voice talent, then obviously that does not react well to trying to be speeded up. You suddenly get this, suddenly speed up,
Right, it makes it more obvious, essentially.
Exactly, yeah.
So do you get into actually dubbing films where, maybe you're trying to fake lip sync, even though it's a new language, but you're trying to pick translations that might work within not just the timing, but even possibly the mouth shapes or things like that? Yeah,
sure. To be honest, my experience with that is almost exclusively, not exclusively, but almost exclusively from Italian or other languages into English. So I personally do almost all of that. And that is a long job. It really, really is. I mean, we've just done, not just, it was sort of 6-8 months ago, we did a film on Michelangelo made by Sky. And that went out to cinemas last year. And that was all lip sync. It was 3 actors, basically. And that was a bastard. It was good fun, but I mean, it was tough. Lip syncing the whole thing. Fortunately, there we did it locally. So basically, I was cast and as Michelangelo, and the other 2 people came to Milan. So that was good. We could do it, as one normally does ADR. But in other situations, we've linked. And what I have always done so far, hopefully not to the frustration of too many of the voice talents, is I've kind of whispered in my sync, my lip sync, just to provide a guide. Also, to be honest, as when you're doing this adaptation, you kind of need to say it out loud. Or at least that's the way I've found it works best. So yeah, I always say it out loud. Oh no, that doesn't work. Let's try it like that. Oh yeah, that's almost there. Okay, let's take out that article there. Or let's change that verb, do it again. Oh yeah, that's perfect. And so I just record it, even if it's not me. I still record it on the film that I'm adapting for lip sync. So at the end, I've got the whole thing there. If the talent wants to hear that, and especially if it's just a few lines. I mean,
so you do your version of the sync so that you can test it, refine it, and then the talent has something to sort of shadow or a scratch track to reference.
Exactly so. Yeah. So if you can also hear the rhythm, obviously. I mean, if it's kind of supposed to be like that. So if it's kind of supposed to be like that. So they can especially if they're dubbing from a language that maybe they don't understand.
Why do you find it's useful to whisper it? Is that
I just do that so I don't add my interpretation.
I see.
Yeah, because I think that's a lot of the
it's like
one of the possible problems. If the voice director is also a talent, there's always the danger, I think, that you try and get the person to do it as you do it.
Right.
Your direction tends to morph into trying to get someone to, basically to imitate how you do it. So whispering kind of reduces that risk considerably. Yes.
Sure.
It is literally just a rhythmic guide. And that's only because maybe, if it's, as I say, if it's a 1 or 2 liner, you can certainly let them see the film first. You can certainly send the film, they can see the film, but you don't really need 100% to send them that part of the film and then redo it, always send the film. Once they know what they're doing, they can do it wild.
Yeah, and some actors work better off of like hear it, say it. It's not always about looking at the film. I've seen many times where the film becomes almost a distraction. Or
yes.
Something that overcomplicates things. And if you can get the right timing, if it's lip sync and you have a guide track like you have, that may be all that's necessary.
Yeah. Sometimes it really, really is. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's great for somebody to be able to see who they are. So, I mean,
Sure. So they get an idea of the character. And
exactly, the physicality as well. And also what they're doing. I mean, the kind of stuff that we do, unfortunately, we don't do a lot of cinema, and it's certainly not linking, not with Source
like
Connect
remote
and so on.
ADR.
So I mean, it's not a common problem for us. But anyway, being able to see who you are and see if you're speaking straight to camera or you're kind of turning around and doing something else and then coming back. I mean, all that kind of stuff. It's certainly good to see it.
I think it's sometimes a telltale sign when you see something that's dubbed and the dubbing is too clean, or sometimes some of the physical like movements and things that might make somebody, who knows, like out of breath, or just even some of the movements that maybe are captured as part of the dialogue. And then when it's, switched out, so now that original track is gone and the new language is in, sometimes the issue is that the new language is like too clean. That makes it too obvious that it's been replaced. And you don't have do the actors have to sometimes get into a little bit of movement or whatnot to try to, sell the new performance that it's,
absolutely, absolutely. Especially in what we lamentably do little of, which is, of course, cinema. Just in brackets, I mean, Mussolini banned foreign language, and so the Italians, everything was dubbed. And there are some now, of course, with Netflix and Prime and so on. People are getting more used to looking at subtitles in the last 5 years or so. I mean, I would always watch a Spanish film in Spanish with subtitles, personally, because in the UK, that's how I was brought up, kind of thing. But, I certainly appreciate watching it in the original language, and I don't mind looking at the subtitles because the Italians have had, they're not used to it. And as I say, now they're getting more used to it. But for decades, everything was dubbed. Absolutely everything was dubbed into Italian. And still is in mainstream TV, absolutely. All this,
sure. Well, it's
acres
good to have
and kilometers
it that way.
of series brought over from the States, reality TV, comedy series, crime series, everything dubbed into Italian. So, I mean, actually, the Italians, I think, are probably, if not the most accomplished kind of dubbers in the world. Certainly.
Although you do know about the Russian story. Have you heard this story?
No, tell me.
So in the 80s, American movies were banned, but they would smuggle them in. And the way they would do the dubbing is they would literally just, like, whoever smuggled these in had a girlfriend who spoke English. Or sorry, who spoke English so she could understand. And they would literally just sit there in the theater, shoot the video off of the screen while she listened on headphones and just repeated everything back in Russian.
Oh, sure. One voice doing the whole thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So she was the voice of Rocky. She was the voice of everybody. And and she's like a celebrity because all Russians, like, she's the iconic.
Right. Well, it's basically, it's simultaneous translation. Yeah.
Literally. Yeah. One shot.
Yeah.
I think the classic story, though, is the first Mad Max, when it was released in America, was dubbed.
It was dubbed by an American
Mel
actor.
Gibson was dubbed by an American?
Yeah.
Wow. That's hilarious.
And Chaz from Access Talent was the guy that was the agent who supplied the actor for the for the Mad Max film. And we had a conversation about it. And the guy I was with, an Australian guy, said, "I've got a copy of that on VHS." And we sent it to him.
Right.
That was in the days when no one could understand Australians.
What'd you say?
Yeah.
I said I live in Austria.
Oh, I understand.
Right. That's what I thought you said. Yeah.
In your studio, because we always have to get a bit techie, what sort of gear have you got?
Oh, right. Well, you're asking absolutely the wrong person. Stupidly, I didn't ask them to make me a list.
Oh, what's the badge on the microphone you're talking into?
Computers, microphones,
Well, we're using pretty much all Neumann mics. We've not updated completely our Pro Tools yet. Don't ask me what version we've got, but we're not using the very latest one because with 5 Studios it comes in at quite a price to keep on updating everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, we're all Pro Tools. It's all Pro Tools everywhere. Although we also use Cubase and Logic and stuff for the musical stuff. What else?
I always find it interesting, though, talking about gear, though, how in different countries, different gear is adopted. It's not a general thing. I saw a photograph pop up on Twitter, and it was just a female voice talent who had won an award or something. I can't even think what it was now, but I looked immediately, saw the photograph and went, English. And the thing that gave it away was the only people in the world, and I've got a funny feeling you have a pair of these, Daniel, is the BBC-style huge white headphones.
Yeah, that's right.
I can't even think of the brand.
Right now.
But I saw them in English because no one else wears them.
No, you're right. But
which ones are these? I'll have to look this up.
Because they're so closed.
Yeah.
I mean, they really, really are. And you really can tell the difference. And maybe they don't have the best sound for you, voice talent in your ears. I don't know, although it's pretty damn good. But they don't leak. So, you can have that film at a certain volume that you're listening to and dubbing over, and it won't come out. Obviously, it will at a certain volume. But, I mean, there's more tolerance for these things. You're right, it's like wearing a kind of, they're pretty industrial looking and feeling, but they're not particularly cool.
But it is so unique and it's so English to see those headphones. I think they were designed for drummers, I think. I could be wrong, but...
my interest is so piqued. I'm trying to figure out which ones they are now.
Well, if you just
have a look at any photographs of the Beatles. They used to wear them at EMI in London.
Oh, so they're like the little flat ones with the round thing, and like they're like a flat rectangle with a round thing in the middle.
The Bayer Dynamic.
Is that who makes them?
Yeah, I thought they were. I'm not sure what brand they are, but they're huge, rectangular, big, almost like a small brick.
Yeah,
exactly. Little round thing off the end. Yeah, you see those all the time. But they still make those, or are those just classic headphones?
They do still make them. We still have the original ones that we got in the early 90s. We still got them, and every 5 or 6 years we just changed the pad part. We've just ordered another 20 or so.
Is that right?
Yeah, they just pop out and you pop the new ones on. Once I was going home and. My girlfriend was saying, what's all that black you've got on your ears
yeah.
and head?
Yes. The same thing happens to the Sonys.
So, okay, yeah, that's what it is. It's the rubber. So now we've got these, I think it's velvet or some other material. Bit squeakier than the rubber, but never mind.
Yeah. Yes. Well, my oldest headphones, and this is a thumbs up for AKG, is a pair of K141s that I got in 1980.
Whoa.
And they're still going strong. They're perfect. In fact, they did go in one ear, but I just pulled the cap off and we just soldered up the wire that snapped off and put them back together again. Bingo. Beautiful.
Wow. That's pretty good. That's coming up for 40 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for everyone's curiosity, are we talking about the Bayer Dynamic DT100s?
Yes.
That's a serious pad on the top of those headphones.
Oh, the thing that comes across the top?
Yeah, you can go play football with that.
Yeah, it looks like
your cycling helmet.
It's like you're in a factory or something.
Right.
Yeah.
When you first set up the studio, I'm always curious about this because we spoke to Chris Kent. I think you probably...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And when he set up his studio in London, I said, well, how did you go politically? Isn't it a bit awkward being a talent and having a studio? Don't other studios get their nose out of joint? And he said, well, I just don't tell them.
No, well, I didn't do that. I mean, there's the kind of hub, the studio hub in Milan is near where the RAI, so Italy's version of the BBC, is. And there were, 30 or 40 studios in that area. And I set mine up in a different area on purpose so as not to tell the people that had, fed me for 10 years previously, that I was kind of starting up in competition with them. And to be honest, I mean, we do an awful lot of work in the language education market. I would say that, well, no, I would say I know damn well that is like 60% of the stuff we do. So we record dictionaries for HarperCollins. We've just done one in 7 languages.
Reading a dictionary.
We record language courses, the monologues and the dialogues for Pearson, for lots and lots of different people. So I wasn't really into competition, and I tried very much. I didn't go fishing for the clients that I knew. I just, been recording with other people. So I think I was very diligent about that. Having said that, though, Andrew, you're absolutely right. I mean, a week after I'd set up my studio, all of my clients just stopped calling me, my local clients. I mean, the local studios, not necessarily the client, but the studios just said, all right, that's that. So to discourage people also, in a way, to come to me, because everybody would always go to this other hub, and, all the video post-production facilities were in that hub. So it always made sense for people to do any voiceover work there as well. They could literally walk across the road and go to a recording studio and then come back again and finish off the video edit. And more and more companies were setting up where they do both video and audio, so it kind of made sense. And we were happy doing our language course and other stuff. Although, I lost a lot of clients when I set up, and then 12 years later, I just decided enough is enough, guys. And we came here to the hub and set up our studio here.
Are they fine with it now, though, or is it still a bit of animosity?
Well, I mean, they're kind of fine with it. Get on well with everybody. I am being called now much more than I was for the first 5 to 10 years afterwards. It was quite dramatic because, I mean, I don't think I ever went over 12 or 13 dubs in a day. But there were times when I'd leave the taxi running outside, jump in, do the stuff, go back, get back in the taxi and go somewhere else. The 80s really that were like that. And when I started up, I really didn't. When I first started up, we had one studio and it was mainly for me, and I didn't really advertise it. And so, yes, it was a bit like Chris Kent said. I mean, I just didn't shout about it. But as soon as we started doing the different languages and started to market ourselves, then the kind of the roof fell in for me as a talent here locally. But yeah, now they're okay. Yeah, now we've kind of shaken hands and made up.
So actually talk about that though. So your work as a talent, has that dropped off dramatically, or do you balance it with running networks, or how does it work now?
Yeah, I mean, if I compare what I do now to what I did in the 80s, there's just no comparison, to be perfectly honest. In the 80s, I really was doing masses of work. Also because, as I say, it was a market thing. I mean, there were, either the guy came to your studio or the girl, or you didn't get the dub. I mean, or you didn't get you couldn't do it, or you literally just cross your fingers and ask someone else in another country to do it and then send you the audio. But again, in the 80s, I mean, how would you send the audio? The internet didn't exist. I mean, it was still real. Was still talking reel to reel recording. No digital. Every recording studio would have different sized envelopes and packages with their logo on it, because they'd be sending first reel to reels and then CDs and DATs and Betamaxes and whatever it was, and you'd actually send them by post or by courier to your clients. So being here, in this case in Milan, and being able to offer, cut through all of that and just go to the studio and do it, was hugely beneficial for them as well, for the clients. So yeah, I mean, it would be impossible, I think, for anybody to maintain that kind of flow of work, because obviously slowly Milan started filling up with other people that were doing voiceovers and offering the same service. And Milan was a fashion center. There were loads of models walking around and so on. But and English teachers would come to Milan to teach in the language schools and British Council and what have you. That was pretty much it.
What do you prefer? Do you prefer being a talent, or do you prefer being a producer?
Oh dear, I really, really like both. It's so good though to do the production stuff. the producers or voice directors or whatever you want to call them are obviously the butt of many a great joke, and we all know the classic going through 25 takes and ending up where you've started from, and the guy say, "That's the one," and you're kind of thinking,
Yeah, that's right.
"That's the one I started with, mate." Yeah, sure. But I don't know about you, Andrew. When I was I did some things as a theatre director and actor, and when you're doing the two things together and you're on stage, you're kind of thinking, this is the one time when there's not somebody off stage saying, "Why don't you do it like this?" or apart from that, but I mean, just giving you some feedback, and I find that really, really useful. As a talent, rather than necessarily being left there completely to do whatever you think is most appropriate.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because you are probably one of the, one of the very few people I work with in another country that actually jumps online and directs me. Normally, I'm left here to do my own thing. Sure.
Which is great, of course, because I mean, but I don't know how you felt about that last time we did it, but.
No, I like you said, I agree completely with you. I think it's always far more beneficial to have someone either sitting outside the booth or down the line, because there's you get into it. It's like basically humans are lazy, so we get into a pattern and a rhythm, and we just churn that out. And it's only when someone who's directing you says, "Have you tried this?" or "Why don't we try it this way?" that it actually gets something much better out of you.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I'm very glad that you feel that way. I certainly feel that way, and it's great being, to come back to your question, it's actually great being on the other end. It's great being having the producer's hat on, because again, with that same proviso that I mentioned before, not wanting to foist your style onto somebody else, but obviously you have to come from your style, because you can't not. It's part of you, kind of thing. But as you're not actually doing it, you can play around a little bit, go from imagine how you do it. Of course, you can't avoid that, but also have a kind of, a bird's eye view of it as well, and kind of think of different ways of doing the same thing. I mean, I think that it's a bit of a challenge, but it's also great, and it's also great when you're actually in sync with the talent. And some talents don't like being told to do it another way.
I just find, like I said, I find it easier, and there's other things at play. Depending on your accent, then the rhythm is completely different.
That's true. That's true.
Like if you're American or Australian, New Zealand, English, Scottish, Welsh, whatever, you're all speaking the same language, but it actually is completely different in the rhythm of the way you're delivering it.
Absolutely. Phrasing and inflection are noticeably different. Yeah. I was just thinking of a particular thing. Must have been a couple of years ago. I was with an American talent here in Milan, actually. And I just noticed at a certain point, he said, well, and we suggest, and I said, David, you've just said suggest. It's suggest. He said, well, no, I think we say suggest in American English. I kind of said, no, come on, David, I've watched, hundreds, thousands of hours of American films. I've never heard suggest. Let's just check it. Oh my God, it is suggest. So part of my family is in the States. I'm no stranger to American English, but hey, sometimes a tiny little thing like that can escape you.
Yeah.
So that was a lesson for me.
Have you ever heard that, Robert? Yeah, I've heard anyone say suggest?
I see it as S-U and then jest. So the G is like, not sug-est, or I'm not sure I follow the
I'm obviously now super aware of this, because after embarrassing myself, to be perfectly honest, I hear it all the time now. I suggested it's the G. The first G is very light. I was overemphasizing it there for illustration. But I mean, suggest.
And another interesting one in the same area is clothes, where everyone just says clothes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But it's really clothes. There's a D and then a TH.
Clothes. Yeah,
exactly.
Sure. Oh, one that infuriates me, if we just want to, is the STS ending, which is not anything to do with which part of the Anglophone world you come from.
Yes.
Some people have real problems with that, and
I do. I have a problem with that, I've got to admit.
Say her name, but one of the BBC pronouncers of podcast says, and you can hear us on .podcasts. And I said, well, someone's listening to you.
Yeah, where's the T?
Yeah, no T. It sounds like podcars, like little pods.
Well, like so many words get like little syllables dropped off, and people go their whole life slightly mispronouncing things and not realizing it. And everyone knows what you mean, and in common conversation, but then under the microscope, you're like, that's a funny thing. I've been saying that wrong the whole time.
Don't say for. If it's in a conversational script, you'd say, and for whatever reason, blah, 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 instead of for whatever reason.
Or and a. There's sometimes there's no, you can do it either way, and it's like what rolls off the tongue better. But there's a lot of for just is a whole word unto itself.
It's interesting, though, what you're saying there about enunciating and the f and the for, because that f is the schwa sound, that which we have in father and so on, and it's the most common sound actually in the English language. That so, but of course, when you're doing when you're trying to talk to a global audience, many of whom are not English mother tongue speakers,
well, you got to be very clear for them.
They are often, yes. And I mean, from the first at least 10 or 15 years of my experience over here, people always wanted stuff larger than life. So, I mean, it always had to be quite histrionic. It was kind of Shakespeare meets the contemporary world kind of thing. And always, slower than normal and well enunciated so that it can be understood by people from anywhere in the world. And so on. So, and that has now completely gone out the window, luckily. But the way that you present and voice a video or something that's communicating to people from different languages and different cultures and different, with not English mother tongue, almost always does actually have to be not more histrionic, but enunciated and pronounced in a way that is slightly different from the way that you would speak to people with your own mother tongue.
What's interesting is I was going to say when you have to do stuff that's into English, how often is it English accent versus American accent?
Yeah, that's a good one. Obviously, I've fought for our pitch for many decades, especially, for stuff coming out of Europe and actually going back into Europe. But if it's going to the States, obviously. The opposite is true. Sometimes for again, decades, people used to say to me, can't you just do it with a mid-Atlantic accent? Or can't you just fake an American accent? And I would always say, and obviously still do, no.
What's funny is I remember doing, I was, doing an industrial video, and they were hiring a talent from America, and the recording studio was in, I think it might have been Ireland, actually. So there they are in an English-speaking country, and for their product video, they wanted an American accent because, I remember asking them, and they said in general, the producer was like, in general, there's a more like high tech. The American accent can convey more high tech, whereas the English accent might convey more culture, and the opposite happens. So then we're doing industrial videos, and it's so funny because often when you want the sound of authority, it's an English accent. Why? I don't know.
Well, as I was explaining to Andrew recently, we always get this kind of, can you do, not always, but we do sometimes still to get this kind of mid-Atlantic, don't want it too British or too American. So now I'm saying, well, why don't you just have it Australian? Sort of, people that are non-English native speakers, if they're unsure of where it's coming from, you've won the battle. If you don't want to sound too British or sort of, because obviously with British English, I mean, if you sort of go up the scale and become very RP and sort of BBC, it sounds a bit like a sort of 1950s sort of newscast or documentary or whatever, or maybe that you've just come out of Buckingham Palace. And if you don't go too sort of street, it just sounds like kind of really phony, whatever. So, there's no real escaping a British accent, whatever you do, and anywhere apart from in the middle, it's not really in the middle, but if you, whatever. I mean, it's always going to be recognisably British, whatever.
Do Europeans recognize the subtleties of different American accents? I mean, when they say American, it's like, oh, you can get some country guy, or you can get someone from Chicago, and there's these, New York, and there's so many different American accents. And then in America, it's often that the Midwest and the Canadians are deemed as being the most neutral.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I can go down south to the right place, and it's another language.
Sure.
What I find interesting, and I'm sure that, Daniel, you will remember, because I've got a funny feeling it could be a similar vintage. Back in the days, did you ever used to listen to Radio Luxembourg when you were a kid?
I did, yeah. I was never an avid listener, but I did,
Yeah.
yes. Absolutely.
So if you listened to Radio Luxembourg back in the maybe late 60s, early 70s, half those people on the air were Australians, and they used to call that Mid-Atlantic.
Oh,
so
right,
they'd do all those
go.
sort of jet set ads for Peter Stuyvesant cigarettes and all that kind of thing. But they were a whole bunch of Aussies. It was like the Bud Tingwell and Ed Devereaux and all those guys, Nick Tates and all those characters that wandered into the UK.
Yeah, well, there you go. So you've got a good pedigree there.
Yeah, but it was funny though because that became. Can you do Mid-Atlantic? Yeah, that's Mid-Atlantic. That'll fit. And it was just a well-spoken Aussie, I guess.
Yeah, sure. That's great. That's good. So that backs up my theory and advice to people. Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So use that one a lot, please.
Exactly. Yeah, right. Absolutely. By the way, I mean, if anybody wants to look more at what we're doing, it's networkseurope.net.
And if we want to book Daniel, how do we go about that?
Oh, we can just give me a call. No, my personal website is danielrichards.tv. It was the only one that still had a Daniel Richards available.
Yes.
That's
excellent.
Thank you so much.
Well, thanks again. Enjoy Milan, you lucky devil. Wish I was there.
Yeah, it's becoming really nice, I must say. Yeah.
It's a beautiful
a bit
place.
grey and kind of Northern European, Central European, whatever. No, Northern European, kind of not grimy, but sort of very workaholic place. Now it's become fun.
Oh, really?
It's very much on the stop on the tourist itineraries, so it's full of tourists now. It's really strange. I mean, 25, 30 years ago, the Cathedral Square was just abandoned and completely empty most of the day. Now you can hardly you have to kind of, elbow your way through it these days.
Yeah.
It's absolutely booming, and loads of new restaurants and night spots and cool museums and exhibitions and stuff to do. I mean, it really it's buzzing now. It's great. It's been fun watching and being part of being here for that transformation, because it really is very, very noticeable. So drop by. Yeah.
Well, I was there first time I went to Milan was 1986, and it was actually when Chernobyl went up.
All right.
So we were all there in Italy. It wasn't in Milan when we found out. I think we just gone to Rome, and then the news broke. But it obviously been up weeks before anyone knew, and so we scattered, and because everyone thought the cloud was heading south.
Ah, right.
But as it turned out, it wasn't heading south; it was heading west. So a couple of us, we flew back to the UK and sat under the freaking nuclear cloud. We're happy about that, or radioactive cloud. I'm still here, though.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Good. Me too.
All your extra fingers and everything.
Yep. I've got a head like a cactus, but apart from that, everything's tickety-boo.
Tickety-boos, but we don't hear very much in the UK.
Yeah.
So.
Thank God for that.
Have a great rest of your day, night.
That was the Pro Audio Suite. If you have any questions or ideas for a show, let us know via our Facebook, the Pro Audio Suite Podcast.
You look for trouble.